Fire Emblem is a baffling series for me to try to talk about for many reasons. One of which is, frankly, that in many ways it's a point of weird trauma. I was a kid, fresh on the internet, wanting to talk about my favorite characters in the, at the time, only game in the series out for the US, trying to communicate on the Nintendo Power forums to a group of people that had many, many different ways to think and talk about the series, some of which ran in direct conflict with what I did. Now, I've had to massively revise this essay almost from word go because I have to concede that my viewing audience probably isn't wholly comprised of people deep in the FE fandom. I don't know, it feels like most of you are carryovers from my last political video, and I swear I'm making another video about capitalism, so I'm gonna wager that most of you aren't in the dark about one of my favorite series of all time, Fire Emblem. Dear God in heaven, forgive me. Okay, so for the blessedly uninitiated, Fire Emblem is a series of Nintendo-exclusive strategy RPG games made by Intelligent Systems. They are high fantasy war games, basically, where you amass an army of colorful anime children and send them off to war, with a twist in that should anyone in your army lose all of their HP, they die forever. As the series has progressed from its humble roots in the NES era, the stories have been getting more detailed, more sweeping, the cast of characters are just absolutely massive. It's a lot, and there are a lot of things to talk about within the series in my usual fare, I don't know, look, if this were one of my regular videos, I'd basically be talking about, how we interpret genre fiction and the absent facile ethos of Nintendo properties, and, how when a series like Fire Emblem wants you to engage in thinking about its story, it can basically ruin your life forever, because none of these games are made to be thought about critically. I don't know, let me know in the comments if that's something you'd like, but today, I'm going a little more niche. Today, we're gonna talk Fandom. So, in my many sordid years being a lurking internet gremlin, I've never really run into a fandom that hates itself more than Fire Emblem, except maybe, I don't know, Pokemon and Smash Bros. And the people that comment on Nintendo Directs. But anyways, it's a hard topic to approach in this context because fandom always subdivides when you get down to the granular level. As much as many predominant fandom groups are self-loathing, openly detesting the series, there are likely smaller groups that are not nearly so toxic and meme-filled, and the overwhelming question that's been plaguing me ever since I was a shitty 9-year-old is, why? Why are people who like this game like this? Because I kind of like all the games. I wouldn't go as far as I do with Final Fantasy and say that all the mainline titles are good, actually, but they are all perfectly enjoyable if, strategy RPG is your cheese, and in a lot of sub-fandom circles it clearly is. Look, okay, story time, sorry. Okay, once upon a time, when I was a shitty 9-year-old, or, I don't know, about that age, I don't know when I actually bought the first US release Fire Emblem, but I was a child. The internet hadn't really existed in the way it does now. This was around the mid-1600s, about when Cromwell's Commonwealth of England was busy arresting carollers during a quasi-literal war on Prus. Anyway, I was a shitty child who had just gotten word from my equally shitty older sibling that internet forums exist. There are places online where I could theoretically meet other people that also like this game I picked up, and we can talk about it. Oh boy. Sign me up. Yeah, so the Nintendo Power Forum years of my life were not the kindest. That's not to say that these forums were just where joy went to die before Twitter took that job. I did have some friends there who I did bond with, but predominantly the forum was overwhelmed by, theory crafters, people who were committed to solving these games in the most efficient way possible, which did not mesh with my naive casual play style of, I like this character, so I'm gonna use them. This diversion was all to, one, talk shit on my old days, because I did not have a good introduction to the Fire Emblem community, and also to point out that the people would not be flaming a 9-year-old online over being bad at strategy games if they didn't on some level enjoy playing strategy games. So, circling back to this idea that Fire Emblem bad, a pervasive element of pretty much every community I've been a part of, a lot of this stems from the fact that the games are all, in many ways, highly variable. Outside of the pretty tightly controlled narratives, the games are almost all highly versatile from a mechanical standpoint. Most of them have easier difficulties, RIP to the Kaga era of FE, and as a result, you end up having a pretty diverse group of people in the fandom at large. Now, there are some complicating factors, both mechanical and not mechanically speaking, the games are all set apart from similar titles, not just with the inclusion of permadeath, but with the fact that stat growths are determined through RNG. This means that every unit is technically only likely to be good or likely to be bad from a strict mechanical stat growth perspective. There's a lot more to each unit outside of their stats, obviously, but the variable nature of development can make it hard to play these games with a lot of certainty outside of, specific units that start good and kind of don't need more stats to be good. But remember that because there are many different difficulty modes in most of these games, people across the board are going to be having different experiences. As possibly the most powerful casual player ever, TM, I'm really going to keep that. I have a kind of intuitive sense of what units are supposed to be able to do what, an intuition that doesn't exist in higher difficulties. This means that anyone who engages with the games primarily through the mechanics are already going to be colored by their own experiences and own preferred playstyles. This is to say nothing of LTC runners, speed runners, theory crafters, challenge runners, drafts, Ironmans. There are a ton of different playstyles here, and if we don't have a common language here, we're going to struggle to communicate. On the non-mechanic side, that would kind of need its own video, but I'm gonna try to be brief. Okay, so Fire Emblem by and large are games set in a high fantasy medieval-esque era. Most of the main characters are some flavor of royalty. Most of the stories are about a kingdom getting deposed by bad conquerors, and it's your job to take your home back. These games play almost entirely within established high fantasy tropes. It's all like, I don't know, Elizabethan era epics of sublimely good princes and princesses fighting against a foreign evil. Around the time that everyone in Europe was growing tomatoes ornamentally because apparently in the late 1500s white people thought they were poisonous. Later installations of these games try to adapt more progressive values in actually deciding to include more slightly less racist depictions of more ethnically diverse characters, more girl bosses, you know how it is, but have also not really tried to push a more progressive, structural ethos. The most systemic critique involved in Fire Emblem recently was in Three Houses, which, again, we're gonna need its own video to discuss. Dear God, I'm gonna turn into an FE YouTuber at this rate, kill me. This is all to say that there's a lot of angles to approach this series, and most of them make it really easy to hate some aspect of the game. The story bad, mechanics bad, war crimes bad. The series has a couple of titles that accidentally do an incest. The games, for being a Nintendo exclusive, lack the kind of charming, easy polish that a lot of their core titles have. And I'm not, an industry scholar, so I don't know what's up, but the games are all hot messes in some way or another. Now, this isn't a unique situation to be in online. All art is flawed, obviously. However, if you bring such a variable kind of game into a community with a lot of means of legitimate criticism, you're gonna find yourself in, internet hell. So, as flawed as these games are, which they all are, the most damning part of them is that they are, by and large, perfectly enjoyable games. The characters can be very fun to play with, the strategy is pretty engaging, the random numbers dictating hits, misses, levels, etc. make it a very engaging game to replay, and it also helps create a wonderful amount of meta-narrative potential. But if you're irony poisoned and social media has stolen all sense of joy out of you, pretty much anyone who likes anything about these games can be shot down by the series' multitude of failures. Oh, you like Edelgard for whatever reason? Don't you know she's bad, actually? Oh, you like using high investment units? Don't you know that Pent exists? Oh, you're a try-hard LTC runner? Don't you know that you can, in fact, enjoy casual gameplay? I'm being a bit uncharitable here, and also, a little inaccurate. Like, I'm sure this happens a lot in the fandom discourse, but it goes deeper than this in kind of the opposite direction. Fire Emblem as a fandom is one at odds with what everyone likes and hates about the games, and you kind of carve your own path, you know? You like what you like, play how you will, and it's really easy to have this idiosyncratic sense of engagement with the series as a whole, which kind of all comes together in utter chaos when you try to engage with other people, especially online. So you thinking that one game or another is good or bad, characters that are good or bad, all of that will invariably brush up against other people or entire groups of people. Like, there just isn't a clear baseline established. If I were to say, like I did as a shitty 9-year-old back during the Battle of Waterloo, that Marcus is a bad unit, what I meant back then is that my first experience playing FE7 left me too frustrated to finish it because most of my units weren't able to hold their own. Like legit, it was Marcus, Louise, and Hawkeye the game. I had early promoted a bunch of mages, and Lynn, and my Hector was like level 2 unpromoted. It was bad. And from that I learned that Marcus, taking all the experience I needed for my other units, ruined my enjoyment of the game. But the folks on the forums were very much not on board with that assessment, often citing Marcus's incredible utility, his solid stats, his great weapon levels, his high movement, the fact that he doesn't fall off that badly, and how, like, nigh essential he is in hard mode runs in the game, which, you know, to this day I still haven't played. Conversely, those folks hated Nino, my personal favorite FE character as a kid, because she joins about 5 maps from the end of the game at a comically low level, outweighed by, I think, literally every magic tome, and just isn't viable in higher level play. But that goes right against my own experiences, right? Because I really liked her character, and the feeling of growing a unit like that from the ground up so late felt amazing, because you can get her strong enough to absolutely devastate the last couple of chapters if you're committed to it. Neither position on either character is wrong by any objective manner, but we are going to talk past each other every time, and that can be very frustrating. Even something as minute as liking one character for whatever reason you do can be taken down because liking a character's personality may not factor in on someone who's assessing a character's function mechanically, which also isn't helped by the fact that Fire Emblem has a notorious habit of cannibalizing its narrative elements in the name of intended mechanical design, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Honestly, this is a weird video for me to make, because those early years really did taint my relationship with the fandom at large. I do genuinely love this series. I play these games all the time. This and Final Fantasy are basically my video game niche, but where I'm always ready to talk at length about liking Final Fantasy games, I don't get the kind of pushback for my weird positive energy like I do with Fire Emblem. I moved on from Nintendo Power to FE Planet, only to be met with the same kind of negativity, even getting folks who kind of mocked me a lot because I liked Leonardo from Radiant Dawn, and archers in general. I know, die mad. It's just hard to be in a community that's perceived to be so hostile, and I have found some interesting spaces, albeit even they are often soaked in meme-based irony or a weird militaristic persecution of engaging with the game's darker themes. But I think in the broader sense, we can learn a bit from looking at fandom subcultures like this. H. Bomber Guy once wrote at length about Bloodborne and Dark Souls 2, where he kind of proposed the question of whether or not you can play a game wrong. And I think Fire Emblem is kind of a great case study. A lot of people in the community have pretty hard opinions on what they deem to be good or bad ways of playing these games, and at the core of this tension is this horrible inability to communicate properly. You know, it's easy to quip back at people, to reduce your opinion into a kind of inflammatory hot take. It can keep your opinion obscured, it can put you in a position where you don't have to interrogate your own experiences, but it can make it hard to find real common ground in a community. And, like, I do get that Fire Emblem's fandom doesn't need common ground necessarily. Like, this isn't a pressing social issue. The world isn't gonna end because I can't properly communicate why I like, you know, Crimson Flower without worrying that people are gonna think I'm history's greatest monster. But, you know, while we're all locked indoors forever with all the chaos and misery in the world, It can kind of suck to feel horribly alone within a community space. Okay. Special thanks to Evan Kearns, Alistair V, D.R. Baker, Pahor, Maria Aladren, Brandon Haney, and Narai the Redmarked.